Hello and welcome. This is VCD Roundtable episode number 45. And in today's episode, we are going to talk about our expectations for 2025. But from what we discussed beforehand, it might go a bit into 2026 and stuff like that before. My name is Yves Sanford. I'm going to be the host for today. And with me are Sasha.
Yeah, hello, welcome to our episode. Matthias.
Yeah, welcome. Happy New Year 2025. Welcome to this episode.
So the last year ended a bit with the fact that we know that quite a few things are going to change in the service provider space. We know that Cloud Director in the long run is going to go away. We know VCF9 is going to come. We know people are still on the V2T migration path, and a lot of things, even though everybody is finished by now, it's just test environments, some rare ones which we are migrating with a few thousand tenants. But that's a different story, or not a different story. It basically all falls into the scenario is how should service providers prepare themselves for what's on the horizon with VCF9 and VCD going to go away in the long run. And clearly a lot of this is reading the glass ball by now. The only things which we shared in the previous sessions were what we really fully know. But today's session is a bit more of a glass ball session. So we are going to take our own personal opinions on what we think, how this is going to be. We are going to throw in a bunch of information which we currently discuss with the service providers who actually come in and originally say is like, hey, we are going to wait until all of this is over. Where I say is like, this brought you as far as with your V2T migration. You're now migrating unsupported into hopefully something supported. So let's kick off the discussion. Matthias, do you want to throw in a first statement on that one?
Yeah. So thanks for that. We already discussed a lot, which is common knowledge so far, that VCF9 will be the new golden standard in terms of basic infrastructure. So VCF 5.2.x, which is the current version, will be replaced or migrated to VCF9. And what we also know is VCF9 will be different, a little bit different from the behavior, from a role distribution between the different components within VCF. And Cloud Director, as you said, will go away. What will stay? That's not the glass ball part. We have the second product, which is called today ARIA Automation. And this will also not really go away, but so Cloud Director and ARIA Automation will be merged into something we call VCF Automation. But I assume that VCF Automation will be partly a descendant or precedent to ARIA Automation, but other parts will move to the vSphere stack of VCF, or the vSphere part of VCF, what we, for example, call namespaces and stuff like this. So I think that's a huge game changer. We need to understand how that new part, VCF automation, will work, which capabilities it offers, and which features are available from the beginning. Because what we saw on the roadmap is kind of VCF automation will be there from the beginning, but presumably not offering all features which are planned over the lifetime of the product. So the beginning will be challenging. And I think a question will be, Sasha, maybe you have a good answer to this one. If I'm a CSP, right, and I'm currently ramping up a new infrastructure, what should I aim for? Should I go, oh, I know the Cloud Director will go away sooner or later. Should I wait? Should I still bet using Cloud Director to implement all the business requirements I have and for features from the customers? Or should I wait or just skip the business?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So we had this discussion with a lot of service providers. So with the white label program, we get in contact with a lot of service providers, and many of them are currently don't using. They only used the license model in the past. Now figured out with VCF and all the Cloud Director stuff is included. They might have to take a look inside, and with many discussion and design discussions of the complete environments and health checks, we showed them that this old structure where you have vSphere and multi-tenancy, try to use multi-tenancy on vSphere, that doesn't work. That doesn't work on vSphere, that doesn't work on NSX. And with all of that combined, we need to clearly say, hey, you need a multi-tenant solution. And you need it, and you are not able to wait until VCF comes with multi-tenant solutions, especially for the shared environments. So what we heard is that we will get multi-tenancy in a basic way with VCF 9, and will get shared support or for shared workload domains for the service providers beginning with 9.1. So that means also not all of the features will be available in the first release. So from that perspective, I would clearly recommend every customer, every service providers who are not using a real multi-tenant solution, still start with VCD. So VCD is the right product for it. Also for service providers who are using VCD, still go the route with VCD. I think we have a really good product. It's a stable product. The customers like the VCD with the multi-tenancy, not only for service providers who provide this public to their customers, also for service providers who are using it for their own internal teams to set permission on the different teams. Because think about your service providers have hundreds, thousands of customers, and everyone have access to all of the customers. That doesn't work. And if you explain this to your customer that hundreds of consultants have access to your environment, they will not be happy with that. So my absolutely recommendation is to go with VCD also if you start. There will be an upgrade path. Nobody knows who will create this update tools or this migration tools from VCD to VCF for multi-tenancy, but there will be a way and be a tool. And with this focus, I would clearly recommend. If you are starting, start with VCD.
So if I get it correctly, so maybe we should separate two different parts of CSPs, because we have CSPs working with a shared environment, what you have mentioned, and I agree with the route you suggested. But on the other hand, we have CSPs using dedicated environments for their customers. So I think we should separate those two stories from each other.
Absolutely.
Also, what we saw so far in the roadmap is VCF 9, so the first release, should be good to go for dedicated environments. And what Broadcom is offering is a VCF 9 assessment tool. It has a new name, but I'm not sharing the name. Let's stick with VCF 9 assessment tool, which suggests if you can migrate your current infrastructure into VCF 9, yes or no. But I think if a CSP uses dedicated infrastructures and it solves all the requirements he has, there is no need to introduce Cloud Director to this part, speaking as of now, and stick with the dedicated approach and maybe add VCF automation at a later stage if it solves any business requirements.
So the big question from my perspective also there is, and we now yet not have a look or the ability to look in VCF 9. So we don't know the availability, tenant availability of features included in VCF 9, and that's a problem. So if you're running only dedicated environments, that might be an option, but the right answer you can only get first when you have a look in VCF 9, what features in multi-tenancy are available, because we have a big set of features. We don't know if all of these features will stay in VCF9 for multi-tenancy or only a part. So I don't expect that all of these features will be included in 9, also not for dedicated environments. Yeah, with dedicated environments, with VCF, you have much more options to give the customers the ability to directly log in vSphere, directly log into NSX. But what we have currently with VCD is that a customer can create a network, that a customer can create firewall rules in a very easy way without having this big knowledge you need on NSX maybe. Also on other parts, how to configure the environment. It's very easy in VCD, and you need much more and special knowledge on vSphere or VCF and NSX if you go the path to share directly NSX Manager and vSphere. And additional to that, we currently don't know if NSX with this interface will be available in VCF9. Maybe much more will be integrated directly in the VCF9 console, and you don't have to do so much directly in NSX. That's the other topic we need to talk about. So currently, as we don't have a view on VCF, we have no idea what we can do.
True, and that's why we're just sharing some ideas we have, and that's the whole story about this episode. It will be interesting. Dedicated environments, I think that's just one part, and the second one is share. I think what will be important is that right from the beginning we're really focusing on VCF9 and also what the new tools and or the new product will offer from a feature perspective. And I think it's very important that we start from the beginning coming up with ideas how to migrate from A to B regarding VCF to VCF migration, like 5.2 to 9 on top, as well as in the nearer future from VCD to VCF automation. And of course, there will be some toolings supporting some or different migration scenarios, but as we saw in the past with V2T, the migration tool solves just the basics or standardized configurations. And as soon as you have some custom built, the tool struggles to migrate, and that's something which needs to be migrated manually. And I assume with Cloud Director, need to be migrated to VCF automation will be even more complex. Even though you have standardized use cases, but a lot more compared to NSX because you have some networking configurations and features, and they can. So in V it's named A, and in T it's B, and you migrate over. But in Cloud Director you have way more different configuration options, and the migration tool might be, or the migration will be challenging. Every migration is challenging, but we need to come up with proper solutions right from the beginning.
And we need to take a real deep look in all of these migration tools. So we saw it in the V2T migration tools. There are so many different versions coming out step by step. And also be skeptical if you run now the assessment tool, if it is available for VCF9. That doesn't mean, so that will work for the enterprise, absolutely. I'm really sure that they bring out a real good product for the assessment. But I don't think that they have the service providers in mind on this migration tool. So we also will spend a lot of time in the next months to check what's possible, what's not possible, what features will work, what features will not work, maybe with VCF9 in the first versions, because I think the assessment tool will not cover all of these different scenarios you have currently on a service provider side. That will be a challenge.
Yeah, it's a more, so yeah, so the first assessment tool will be a more generic approach, like trying to cover just VCF, with not having any specialized entity behind that, like an enterprise or a CSP. I think it will be, by its nature, more enterprise focused, because that's the majority of the customers. But I assume that the first version will just check what's the current VCF configuration from an SDDC manager perspective, and can this configuration, because that's the cool part of VCF, it has one central configuration. Can this configuration be migrated to VCF9? Yes or no? And I think that's pretty straightforward. But again, I agree, that's just the infrastructure configuration, which can be decided on, is it migratable, yes or no? But it's not validating any use case which is built on top of the configuration. And that's a different story. And that's where you differentiate between an enterprise and a CSP.
Absolutely. And that's a topic we need to cover. And so also, I'm very interested in the timelines of the third-party vendors. So how long it will be need until all of the backup vendors and replication vendors will cover all of that new VCF9 topics, because I think there will be a lot of major changes also in vSphere, vCenter, and so on. That makes it not easy for the third-party vendors to directly change and get the product certified.
But honestly, Sasha, that's not VCF9 related. We had that topic with
I know.
every single vSphere version in the past. So don't get me wrong on that one.
Absolutely, but as we're talking about some major changes maybe in VCF9, it will take if we take a look what happens in the past, it will take much longer as we get support for this third-party products.
To like major change.
Yeah.
You might be too young for that, but think about like the change from 4 to 5 in the past. Like that was major, and it took like months for the vendors to adjust. So the changes between the latest versions, like 6 to 7, 7 to 8, were not that big, because the product behavior changed in small features, which added a ton of value for the customers. But the product change itself wasn't that big from my perspective. And then also the APIs didn't change that much. I think, or what I saw, is that the third-party vendors weren't like pushing towards like let's get certified with the new version. Whatever block them to get certified, maybe it's the money, maybe it's the process, whatever. But I think the changes weren't that big. But with VCF9, we have no clue what's the underlying infrastructure, what the underlying infrastructure will be. Let's call it, it's VCF9. There will be a vSphere stack in there, whatever the name will be and the version will be. It could be 8.8 update 4. It could be vSphere 9. It could be, I have no idea what.
I clearly think that they want to go to the version 9 in all products, because otherwise it makes no sense to jump on VCF from 5 to 9.
That's true, but the question is it a new product or just a name or a version change? Because we saw in the past, in a few coincidences, that they just changed the number, like a log inside. I know now it's called I operations for log, but in the past,
VCF log?
Oh, Jesus Christ. But they switched. Back then it was vRealize log inside, but they changed from 4.7 to 8 to streamline the version numbers. So it could be also something like this. Tons of possibilities.
Yeah, so it becomes really interesting. So, but let's cover one other topic. So we got this question from many service providers currently. They are still on NSX-V, so Eve covered it at the beginning, at the intro. What should the service providers do? Stay on NSX-V and waiting for VCF9 to try to do a complete migration or whatever? So I think we also should cover this topic.
Pardon interruption, and I'm really looking forward to the statement of Eve, but we have a question in the chat. Oh, see, I have voice command. So the question is, may I have missed the info? When will VCF9 be released? Will VCD 10.6 be the last standalone version of VCD? We really rely heavily on Cloud Director and so on and so forth. So I think the short answer is, as far as we know, 10.6 will be the last standalone version of Cloud Director. Currently, it's 10.601. I don't know if we are allowed to share a VCF9 release date. There is a roadmap which has a date suggestion. Sasha is nodding.
Yeah. So the idea is VCF9 will released in the mid of this year. So that's public. And VCF9 will not have a shared workload domain support for tenancy. That will starting to come with 9.1, which will be released in 2026. And yeah, it's currently the plan that 10.6 is the last standalone version or version of VCD. It will be integrated in VCF, not longer be a dedicated product. So I would say the features will be integrated in VCF, not only not the product. And if this is the last version, so I would absolutely expect that there will be a new version that support VCF9 in VCD.
But it will be a 10.6 something release.
Yeah, 10.6 something, 10.7. Nobody knows what will be the name of it. But so from that perspective, there will be no new features in the future.
Or maybe rephrase it a little bit. So 10.6, speaking as of today, is not supporting VCF9, right? And there will be, from a timeline perspective, there will be a time frame where we have a Cloud Director version, whatever the name will be, which supports VCF9. And that's the migration window we will have in the future. But we as ComDivision will heavily keep track on all the different features and versions, and then have a migration solution ready by the time it needs to be ready.
Absolutely. But to cover also the second part on the question with the web interface or the interface of VCD, I don't think that Broadcom will migrate this view from VCD in VCF. I more expect that we get more like an VCF or vCenter view for the customers, maybe not on the host side, but on the VM side, on the network side, that we get it more in that way than on the VCD way that we have currently. So that will be my expectation, but again, we don't saw it.
The VCD UI for tenants is great, but it's complex. And if you have no clue what to do, it's overwhelming from a feature perspective. So I assume that the UI will change, because it changed a lot with 10.6, and it will change again massively. But it will be it will offer a reduced feature set towards the tenant to just come up with the features a tenant really needs, what Broadcom thinks a tenant will need, and everything else will be a managed service. It will be easier.
I'm not sure if they will reduce the features, because as we got in the last year the message from Broadcom directly, hey, these are our dedicated workload domains, sell dedicated workload domains to the customers. And the customers wants to have the feature that. So from the Broadcom perspective, no, not via Cloud Director, but over VCF.
That's the question. Like, it's VCD UI. How will VCF UI towards the tenant look like? How will the permissions
Absolutely.
look like?
But yes, but
What can be
I think
shown? What can be hidden in the UI? That will be a big game.
absolutely. But so from my perspective, the new interface for tenants on dedicated workload domains, they should have the same experience like they have in their home cloud with VCF local. So from that ideas, I think we get a permission set where we can say, hey, that's allowed on the customer side and that's not. Like we have it currently with VMC on AWS, AVS, GVZ, and so on. So you can, or the hyperscalers can limit it, but you have the normal vSphere view. So, and I think from my perspective, it will go in that direction because many of the service providers and also normal customers complain that they don't have the normal vSphere view like they expect.
Oh, cool. And guys, and to all our folks listening to us, and that's a cool part. So Sasha and I, we agree that we disagree. So that's a cool thing, having multiple opinions, and that's clear. That clearly shows that we have no knowledge. It's just our opinions we are currently sharing. Thanks for the great question. But Sasha, pardon PTI, pardon interruption. You were to ask Eve a great question. Could you repeat the question?
Yeah, so it was on the site where we covered or got many requests from customers. Also this morning we talked about it. NSX-V. So if I'm now on NSX-V, should I do the transition to T or should I stay on V until VCF 9.1 is out and then migrate directly or whatever? So maybe Matthias, you will cover this question.
Oh, I thought Eve is covering it. Is covering the answer.
Yeah,
So
we have some.
I think I have
audio.
audio back, not ideal audio, but I have some audio back.
Okay.
But I think the answer is very quick, very simple. We don't know what else the migration path is going to look like. So we know, and VMware promised there will be a migration path from current VCD to whatever the new thingy, multi-tenant thingy is going to be called like. So from that perspective, you should definitely do that. There will be absolutely no way that Broadcom or VMware is going to invest anything to get you from NSX-V to whatever the new thingy is. There will be no way into a VCF 9. So the solution is very clear. You currently have a pathway which is still working to get you from NSX-V with whatever vSphere version you are on to VCF 5.2 in combination with VCD and all of these wonderful things. So don't wait. Don't delay it, because also it's actually every day you delay it, the less chance there is, if there is something going wrong and if there is a possibility to get anyone from Broadcom to be reacting on this from a support perspective, is shrinking on a daily basis. There are not that many people left who actually can answer anything on NSX-V. I mean, let alone that even the extended support is out, let alone security incidents and all of these wonderful scenarios. So there is basically no choice. You need to move from V to T/VCF at the fastest pace. Actually, if you are still on V, you can directly move from V into VCF 5.2. Yes, you might need new hardware and everything else, but overall you delayed the project so long that you most likely have to do that anyway. And prepare then to actually move from there to VCF 9. But there will be no options. And Broadcom also made very, very clear that in the future, the time they are accepting that people are running outdated and old versions is going to shrink. They want to have everybody on the same level, on the same grade, and all of these things, more like operating a cloud. There should be no difference for a customer. When you closely watch Hock's keynotes, he says very clearly he doesn't want to have any difference for a customer experience on-prem to public cloud, which also comes back to Sasha's point. I'm also with him. It's like the user interface from VCD. My personal opinion also is going to be that. It's going to be the same like in vSphere or anything else, because of same overview, same usability everywhere. But based on the fact of the same usability, Broadcom needs to get every service provider globally on the same software version, most likely as near as possible. Because in reality, let's face it, even Microsoft has different rollout phases and things like that over the different sites. So that's going to be a reality all across all of them. But yeah, that's my opinion on it. So get going, because it's not going to get easier. It's just going to get more and more difficult and more risky on a daily basis. So now, Matthias, up to you.
Oh, we're already in the famous last words phase, right? Because we're way over time, but it's always the same with us. If we start discussing and sharing knowledge, it's like, time flies by. Yeah, so I think what I expect 2025 and the future or the years beyond, I expect a massive standardization this year with VCF9 and what you said, like streamlining UIs for on-prem, for public cloud. That will be 2026, but it's an expectation. This year will be introduction of VCF9, starting migrations to VCF9, getting hands-on VCF9, and getting familiar with the product. That's what I expect in 2025, and us coming up with cool new use cases and product usages and the product and packaging for the first dedicated infrastructure bits and pieces. So that's what I'm looking forward, or that's what I expect from 2025. Sasha, famous last words.
Yes. So I expect a few years of changes now, with all of this migration phases again. We had V2T, we are still in the V2T, and now planning for going to VCF9. For my last words, I absolutely recommend to take a look what features you are using. Maybe also send it to us. Send your product, send your features in VCD to us that you are currently using. We will catch all of that together and meet together with Broadcom to show, hey, these products are used. Because currently, I think they have a lot of customers where they have big relationships, especially on the Pinnacle partner stuff, where they take care about. But currently, they more or less don't take care about the Pinnacle partners and the registered ones, so the secondary white label ones. And I think we should create a big list of features that are the service providers currently using, share it with us, we will share it with Broadcom. Also, maybe feature requests that can be integrated in future versions, so that we can bring it to the development team of Broadcom and ask if there is a potential option to bring it in the new product.
So that being said, I think it's, as we agree on, you need to get to the current versions. That's one of the most important stuff. Also, if you want to be relevant for your customers, because Broadcom is also going to look for customers and service providers which are on current versions. We already know that they are tracking that currently for licensing purposes and other things, but there will be more reasons behind that. So better be sure to be up to date. If you need any help, feel free to reach out to us. One last word beside this podcast, starting in February, for at least the service providers which are working with us on a training side, which are white label or in any other way related to us, we are going to also host a monthly webinar where we cover all the latest and greatest and news around the VMware ecosystem. And based on that, also what we are really knowing about VCD. The reason for the webinar is it gives us a bit more freedom because we can get everybody to sign an NDA first. That gives us a bit more flexibility on what we can cover there. If you are interested into that, also feel free to ping one of us and we can see if we can get you enlisted for that one as well. That being said, this was our first episode for 2025. We are going to be, at least Sasha and I are going to be with Broadcom next week in Orlando, depending on when this podcast comes out. That might already be in the past, but the week of 21st, some partners are invited by Broadcom to actually meet in Orlando for some advisory boards. as you might expect, ComDivision is going to be there, and we are going to cover that. We are going to cover some latest changes on the Knights program, and then we are going to basically be, for the ComDivision kickoff, back here in Dubai. And we are also going to do an episode, I think, from here as well, as far as I remember, like what we did at all the last kickoffs. So that being said, have a wonderful remainder of the week. And whenever you listen into it, Matthias, not everybody has the day done by Friday afternoon. Morning. Yeah. Good. Okay, everybody. Thank you for listening in. Goodbye.
Have a great weekend. Bye.